Falcons Jags week 4 preview time. We're going to run through the injury reports for both teams, and then we're going to get into some keys to victory along with my score prediction. But let's get familiar with both clubs right now as we get all soccer lingo, because this game is across the pond, and we have the tail of the tape, starting with Atlanta. After their 2-0 start, they fell short in week 3 at Detroit, losing 20-6 after two pretty impressive, I would say, opening wins for the season. Meanwhile, the Jags, they are coming in the wrong direction. After beating the Colts week 1 by 10, they have dropped their next 2 games, which to the Chiefs as expected, but to get completely spanked like Michael Scott with his nephew at home against Houston, 37-17, that's got Jags fans concerned. So, with that being said, who you got in this game? We're going to give score predictions later on, but let me know right off the bat here. Do you have Atlanta or Jacksonville? The Jags used to stink in their second home, which is London, but they have played some pretty good games across the pond lately. They lost last year against the Broncos, but they are 2-3 in their last 5 games over in England. So let me know who you got in this one, Atlanta or Jacksonville. Now, luckily for the Falcons, they have a short injury report. Cordell Patterson, we still are in limbo with him regarding his thigh injury. Josh Ali was limited with an ankle injury, and then Calais Campbell on Wednesday, he did not practice due to a veteran rest day. Meanwhile, the Jags have a much longer injury report. Zay Jones with a knee injury did not practice. That's definitely one to keep an eye on. Anton Harrison, their first-round pick with an ankle, was limited. He is starting for them until their true right tackle is done with his suspension. The next guy, can't pronounce that name, but he is limited with a shoulder injury. Their starting linebacker, Devin Lloyd, did not practice with a thumb injury. Josh Allen, the other Josh Allen, he was limited with a shoulder injury. He is crucial to their pass rush. Antonio Johnson with a hamstring was limited. He's their backup safety. And then Andrew Wingard, a shoulder injury, has him limited as well. But hopefully we're going to see Cordell Patterson. I don't quite know. As I'm filming this right now, which is Wednesday night before I go out of town for a wedding, we are still in limbo regarding Cordell Patterson. I don't think Atlanta expected it for it to take this long. If they did, they would have put him on short-term IR the first day after roster cutdown day and open up an extra roster spot. The fact that they didn't signal they believed Cordell Patterson, the Joker, will be back before the first 4 weeks of the season were over. But here we are entering week 4, and after the last 2 weeks thinking he would be ready to go by Sunday after being limited in practice, he ultimately was inactive. So fingers crossed we're going to see the Joker in the backfield this upcoming Sunday. Now let's get into our keys to victory. My first key to victory is don't interrupt your enemy. You know that one Art of War book, and one of the pillars is don't interrupt your enemy when they're making mistakes. The Jags have been making a lot of mistakes lately. So let them continue making mistakes, right? Don't stop them. Trevor Lawrence has not looked like the first overall pick that we saw for a long stretch last season. He's completing 64% of his passes, 736 yards through 3 games. Okay, that's not bad, but just 3 touchdowns and 2 interceptions. Jacksonville expected a lot more out of Trevor Lawrence so far, and they're not getting it. Hopefully, he does not begin his turnaround in week 4, but the Jags offense has been out of sync. Don't make life easy for them, right? Don't give them free handouts. Don't commit horrible penalties to extend drives and keep the chains moving. Play disciplined, play smart. You don't have to be too aggressive. They're making all the mistakes on their own. Sit back, watch, enjoy the show. Don't try to butt in and then all of a sudden jumpstart their offense for them. My second key to victory, get back to the ground game. I know Arthur Smith knows this and he wants to do this, but they were ineffective at rushing the football in week 3 in their loss in Detroit. And that showed. Look at Atlanta's rushing stats through the first 3 weeks of the season. Week 1, 130 yards, 2 touchdowns from Tyler Algier. Week 2, 211 yards. Desmond Ridder had a rushing touchdown. But week 3 came to a grinding halt. 20 carries for 44 yards and 0 touchdowns. That has to change. Atlanta is 2-0 when getting over 100 yards, and I expect that trend to continue the rest of the way. They have got to be able to pound the rock, and that includes the offensive line getting back on track. Now, before we get to the rest of my keys to victory, today's show is being sponsored by Prize Picks. Prize Picks is a daily fantasy sports app where all you have to do is pick more or less for 2 to 6 player stat projections, and you can win up to 25 times your money on any entry. Prize Picks is super simple and user-friendly. I spend like 1 to 2 minutes on the app every Sunday morning making my selections. So let's say you're in the Oval Office or you're on your way to the game, the bar, your friend's house to watch the game. Get on Prize Picks and start making some money. Now, this week on Prize Picks, here's who I'm going with in this Falcons-Jags game. I'm going more on Desmond Ridder's passing total at 193 yards. I'm taking more on Drake London at 48.5 yards. Hopefully, London goes off in his own town, London. And then I'm taking less on Calvin Ridley at 85.5 yards. He's had a pretty good a nice strong start to the season, but hopefully AJ Terrell can put him in his pocket. Go to prizepicks.com/CLNS and use code CLNS for a first deposit match up to $100. The link for that is in the comments and description of today's video. Prize Picks, daily fantasy sports made easy. All right, moving on to the rest of our keys to victory for Atlanta. Speaking of Calvin Ridley, we need AJ Terrell to dominate, right? This is just one of those revenge games that I don't want to see the headline of Calvin Ridley burns his old team. The Falcons did not move on from Calvin Ridley because they had, well, we don't really know what was going on actually as I kind of backpedal this thought. What was going on between Calvin Ridley and the Atlanta Falcons front office and organization. I'm not quite sure if there's bad blood between the two sides, and if there is, how hot the tempers are. But Calvin Ridley so far for the Jags has been pretty good. 13 grabs, 173 yards, 1 touchdown. He has put up some pretty strong numbers for Trevor Lawrence as his number one go-to guy. So AJ Terrell, who is entering a pretty big year, maybe he can get a contract extension if he continues to play well. Hopefully he can take Calvin Ridley out of the game as much as possible. You're probably not going to limit him to 0 receptions for 0 yards, but if you can limit the damage, if you can keep Calvin Ridley at bay for 4 grabs for 35 yards, that's going to feel like a big win for AJ Terrell. So hopefully Terrell can dominate this matchup. Otherwise, it could be a long day for Atlanta's secondary. Moving on to our fourth key to victory. This one is a big time, you think, Captain Obvious here. Protect Desmond Ridder. They did not do that in week 3, and the result showed. Desmond Ridder this past week against the Lions was 21 for 38, 201 yards, no touchdowns, no interceptions, but his QBR was downright awful, 11.2. Now, I maintain the thought and the belief that it didn't matter who was playing quarterback for the Falcons in week 3. No one was going to play well with the amount of pass rushing that was going on, 7 sacks, and God knows how many pressures Aiden Hutchinson and company generated. But the bizarre thing is, PFF doesn't seem to believe the Falcons' offensive line is playing all that bad, at least not as bad as I think they are playing. I mean, this unit was a top 5, maybe even top 3 offensive line last year behind the Philadelphia Eagles. The Kansas City Chiefs had a good O-line. The Cleveland Browns had a good O-line. And I thought the Falcons were right there with them. I have not seen that group so far this year. I need to see that group. Jake Matthews, Chris Lindstrom, Caleb McGarry, all on good second and third contracts. Matthew Bergeron, early second-round pick. And Drew Dahlman, kind of the redheaded stepchild here, might be the best of all 5 right now, and the least amount of assets have gone into him. So the rest need to catch up. They need to play better, and they have to protect Desmond Ridder. Fifth and final key to victory here, the pass rush needs to wake up. I wasn't quite on board with Terry Fontenot's pass rushing by committee approach and not going and get a true alpha number 1 edge rusher. But if you want to play by committee, fine. But everyone has to contribute. This is like a group project where one person does all the work, and that one person isn't a very smart person in the class. That's not a good committee. This entire group needs to step up. Lorenzo Carter, Caden Ellis, Grady Jarrett, Bud Dupree. If one person's not going to take on the lion's share of the workload, and that's perfectly fine. Not every team has a Myles Garrett, an Aaron Donald, a TJ Watt. So if you want to go with a group approach, fine by me. But we need to see a group approach. If they are not able to generate many pressures or get many sacks on Trevor Lawrence, this is a prime opportunity for T-Law to start his turnaround, right? To start getting back on track in his second home. I'm sure he's got a loft, as they call it over there in London, or a flat, excuse me. And he's going to start dicing and carving up this Falcons defense if he's got all the time in the world. So, unfortunately, Troy Anderson, who's got a sack in the season or half a sack on the year, will not be out there on Sunday, but the rest of the group needs to pick up their play. Predict the score for me, though. Falcons versus Jaguars. What is your score prediction? Let me know down in the comment section. Like I said earlier, I was going to give my score prediction, and I've got the Falcons winning, baby. 24-20. I was a coward last week because deep down I thought Detroit might win. Maybe Atlanta comes down to earth, and I stuck with the Falcons, and I was like, dang it, I kind of knew deep down that Detroit was going to win this one. But I feel much better about this game. I think Atlanta takes care of business. Give me the Falcons by 4.